Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. So today we're getting into our frameworks
Awesome.
series.
Yeah.
And I say series like it's a thing that we're going to be doing, but I mean, that's the point of this channel. So, yeah, we're getting into that rhythm, I guess.
Yeah. Starting to produce episodes on frameworks.
Yes. And so we're starting off with one that we've alluded to before.
Yeah. Several different episodes. I mean, it's a core framework for me, so it's hard not to.
Well, yeah, I was trying to. I was like, I know we referred to it specifically, and I'm forgetting which ones they were.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've alluded to it before in the podcast, and I'm sure in a lot of our writings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is stratified systems theory.
Right. Elliot Jacks.
Yeah. So would you like to give a brief overview of what when you think about stratified systems theory, what comes to mind? What's the spark notes there?
Yeah, the big idea behind stratified systems theory is that as systems get more and more complex, right, you'll find strata within them in order to hold the system together. So as a system evolves and becomes more complex, obviously we're talking about companies, and one of the ways the company controls itself is through creating structure. The system becomes more and more complex, and it develops hierarchies, right? And so the hierarchies that we believe really are important in terms of structure have to do with the time span of objectives associated with the seats as you move up the organization. And we talk about this a lot when we talk about structure, and we also incorporate Elliott's work when we talk about stages of development, right? And so the big idea is that the first strata of a company is focused on sort of day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month work. It has objectives. It's relatively simple problem solving. It's typically line work, situations where people are responsible for producing a certain quality and a certain quantity, and following processes and showing up. And so that's sort of the first strata. It's the simplest strata within the organization. And the next one has a time span of objectives, or if you're sitting in that seat, you have time spans of responsibility anywhere from 3 months to 1 year. Typically, our leaders, they don't need to be people leaders per se. They could be team leaders. Difference between people leaders and team leaders in this formatting is that the people leaders are responsible for developing and coaching and growing the people, as opposed to the team leaders, like on a Tiger team. They're just responsible for making sure that a team that's got a 90-day project, that's involved in a 90-day project, that team performs well. And so you don't need to necessarily be a traditional manager, quote unquote. Stratum 2 leaders could also be people who are just overseeing projects and Tiger teams and things like that. Stratum 3, as we've talked about a lot, right, tends to be people who are running departments. So, sales versus marketing versus data versus product versus engineering versus finance, as an example, customer service, et cetera. And so they tend to have objectives that are associated with the time frames of anywhere from 1 to 2 years. And then you move on to the next strata, which is 2 to 5 years. And that's typically, they're occupied by one of 3 types of humans. Could be a founder, right? And who has all the departments reporting to them. It could be like, in EOS speak, an integrator, or lots of people call them second commands. I like second commands, or a chief operating officer, or like in our organization is comprised of a C-suite, right? And that C-suite oversees obviously various departments. And so in our organization, we have a CMO, we have a chief revenue officer, CMO being chief marketing officer, chief revenue officer, a chief technology and product officer. We have a chief people officer, and we have a chief financial officer. So we have 5 C-suite members who report to me. And then I'm at Stratum 5, which is, responsible for where the organization is going to be in 5 to 10 years. And then you can go to Stratum 6, which is someone who's overseeing multiple Stratum 5 organizations. And then Stratum 7, and that's anywhere from 10 to 20 years. And then Stratum 7 is 20 to 50 years. And that's overseeing multiple companies kind of a thing, right? So it gets pretty sophisticated. That's not what we typically focus on. We're typically focusing on sort of the stage 5 companies that have the the 5 layers or stratums, if you will. So that's the big idea behind stratified systems theory, is thinking about the system in terms of sort of not just objectives, but the competencies that are required in order to meet the objectives. And it's really, competencies, we can dissect the word competencies versus experiences, right? But the experiences and the competencies and the capabilities to be able to execute those seats at that level.
And then given, I guess we're on the topic of stratum.
Yeah.
Right. Given those stratums, those levels, what do you see as the primary mode of thinking for the different stratums, right?
Yeah.
In terms of day-to-day, right? Because if you go higher up, you're getting into more principled thinking.
Yeah.
Versus more surface level, right? How does that depth work as we progress through the stratums?
Yeah. So just think about the sort of the nature of the work or the function, right? So stratum 1 is just producing, right? Stratum 2 is implementing the production, right? Stratum 3 is creating the systems and improving the systems. Stratum 4 is all about integrating the system. So I'm sitting here making sure that marketing and sales and customer service and product and all that works really, really well together. And then obviously Stratum 5 is strategic vision. Not only do you have, like I said earlier, competencies and capacity and capabilities become more sophisticated as you move up, the time span of the objectives expand. And just the nature of the problems that are associated with the work at that level, it sort of moves from, being, early on, stratum 1's trial and error. It's just, figure out how to get a good solve. Number 2 is, experiences and best practices, because they've been doing that. That's how they can lead the people, right? And then the next up is, okay, so root cause analysis, trying to figure out why things aren't working. Then next level up, stratum 4 is systems analysis. And then stratum 5 is really, where's the world going? So it's like market analysis. And I don't like market analysis, actually, because for a lot of, this gets into a topic recently, like founders mode, right? It's not just market analysis, it's a intuitive sense for where the market's going to be in 5 to 10 years, right? So it's vision, right? The issue with problem solving, quote unquote, looking at it through the lens of problem solving, is as you move up the stratums, the problems you are solving go from being real problems that exist today,
very tangible,
yes, to problems that we think are going to exist, right, in a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, right?
Well, if you're trying to solve a problem with that method at stratum 5, the complexity of the problem and the time it takes to solve it, by the time you already solved and addressed the issue, it's either evolved, changed, or there's just an entirely new problem.
Yeah.
And so when you get to, right, and it'd be interesting to see if there's a framework on this, but when you get to those levels, you have to be very aware and in tune with the logical issue at hand, right? Then the intuitive side of things, like how does this work? And then what is the basically projection for it? And then, right, all of those things inside, and you have to have that experience to inform that intuition.
Yes.
And all these things come together to, right, make those marginal gains to build out that whole picture and that informed worldview that is useful in that circumstance.
Yeah, and worldview is a really interesting, word to throw into this discussion. But, I do think as you move up the strata, the importance of having a broader worldview, not just in terms of where the world is, but where the world's going, is pretty darn important, right? Because at stratum 5, you are, the old Wayne Gretzky line, right? I skate to where the puck's going. You are saying this is where the puck's going, right? And it goes back to, I have a lot of people in the company know this, right? But I have a Prezi from 2012 talking about when AI gets here, how we're going to incorporate it into the platform. So, there's an example of a perspective that I didn't know exactly when it would get here, but I knew it was coming. And so now if you know it's coming, you're doing work in anticipation of that. So you're not ignoring it. You're like saying, okay, so if we're ultimately going to be having AI in our lifetimes, especially as me as a leader, if I think AI is going to be here within some certain period of time, what are the implications? And am I doing the work that's not going to all of a sudden be, in hindsight, ridiculously bad use of time, knowing that this is where the world's going to move, right? And so, so that sense of worldview, sense of how the world's evolving, the sense of what the nature of the markets, the nature of the technology is going to be in 5 to 10 years. It's not, right? This is not something that everybody's, not only, I don't want to say capable because that sounds so whatever, arrogant, right? But I think some people are really fascinated by it and willing to do the hard work to think about it and investigate in it and think about it like a lot. I mean, if you think about it from my perspective, and this gets a bit into founder mode stuff, right? I mean, I've been thinking and working on, anticipating AI for over a decade. And it's not like, what I mean by that is literally, reading and thinking and okay, so how is this going to impact what we're doing? And so, I've got, I don't know, thousands of hours invested since 2012 in thinking about this stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's, to your point, capable isn't the right word.
Yeah.
But it's really challenging to get to that point, right? Even if you have all the personality things in your favor,
right?
So you have to be willing to embrace that discomfort of developing your worldview, because there's gonna be a lot of things that challenge it.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out what's good, what's bad, what works, what doesn't work.
Right.
And really fill in and seek out all those blind spots, right? Because where something's a little dark and fuzzy,
yeah.
It's like that means that's not like, oh, we're going to avoid that because that's not as much fun, either from whatever perspective.
Yeah.
Could be an ego thing, could be a time thing, could be a comfort thing, whatever, right? But that's where you have to look, because that's where you're going to get caught.
Well, and there's so much more we can get into this. Just yesterday, I was working on a piece, and once again, it was someone shared some stuff with founder mode, because that's so topical right now, right? And what are the characteristics of a visionary founder, which is really what founder mode's all about. And I and you and I've had a lot of conversations on visionaries and sort of exceptional founders, in terms of all these different attributes, right? And I came up with I was reading someone else's stuff, and I came up with like 15 different characteristics. But one of them, to state the obvious, is if you don't have an optimistic perspective about where the world's going to be in 5 to 10 years, why the hell would you be doing all this work? Why would you be reading? Because one of the other characteristics of most founders, and I think founder mode is actually not perfect. I think it's really more visionary mode, because it's someone who's got a strong vision of where the world's going to be in 5 to 10 years or 10 to 20 years, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is, quote unquote, right? And so, by definition, you got to be optimistic. You've got to have a point of view about how the world's evolving. And what you tend to see, I deeply believe, is that those visionaries, they're some of the hardest working people out there, because it's not just a 9-to-5 job by any stretch of the imagination. As I'm reading every single day, 7 days a week, and thinking and writing and trying to understand where the world's going, because as part of it, we've got 190 people who are with me on this journey, and I care deeply about doing the right thing for them and for all of our clients. And so, it's not playing the long game requires a lot of different characteristics.
Yeah, you almost have to enter it, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but with like a cynically ambitious optimism, whereas there has to be, I see the problem, and then it's up to me to solve the problem, and then it will be better if I do that.
And and you mentioned discomfort earlier, and you have to be at peace with the fact that you don't have all the answers, right?
and there will be times where you feel like you have even less answers than you did at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. And it's,
because it's not like this, right? The way sort of companies evolve and societies evolve and individuals evolve. We go like this, and all of a sudden, oops, something that we thought was real or that we completely understood is not what we understood. And so, we go backwards a little bit because it's like, ooh, now I've got to revise the way I think, which is part of the worldview stuff, right? Got to revise the way I think. And now, what are the implications? Does it have big implications on where we were taking the company, or is it like, okay, yeah, it's no big deal? And so you gotta be comfortable with the ambiguity associated with getting from here to there, and just sort of have confidence in not just your own ability, but you and your team's ability to navigate the unknown pieces.
Yeah, and I think a huge piece is consistency.
Yeah,
and I think it's being disciplined in the sense that you are dampening the volatility within yourself, right, as forces external or within your team or whatever, right, act upon it and make you doubt things or make you a little bit overexcited about things. And it's like, no, we just have to keep holding the course. And then when it comes to the worldview, it's right. You have to have the better developed your worldview is, the better off you are, because if you have a fragile, incomplete worldview, and something comes in that just destroys it, that leaves you, that's traumatizing.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not going to be good for you or the people that you're leading.
No. And I think we've had the discussion in one of the earlier podcasts about, my favorite version of a story around that destruction of one's worldview is the last episode of MASH, right? And so where, Hawkeye's worldview is completely disintegrated, and he goes insane for a while, and, the whole episode is part of it is trying to figure out why the heck Hawkeye's gone mad, but you can go check that out on your own. But, this is why I believe that really, really strong sort of stratum 5 or higher visionaries, this consistency thing is really super important, right? Because it's compounding, right? I could talk about scalars versus scalars. The scalars are very clear on where they're going. And, the things that I think you need to be really clear on are your forever agreements, right? Who you are, right? What's your compelling why? What's your compelling value proposition? Who do you serve? And who are you culturally speaking? Because if you can keep all those things, like if you once you nail those things in, it makes it easier for you to be consistent, right? And staying consistent gives you the power of compounding, right? If you're going all over the place, you're basically not taking advantage of the power of compounding, and worse, you end up frustrating the heck out of a lot of your ideal stakeholders. Your employees are like, well, last week we were doing this, or last quarter we were doing this, and now we're doing this, and everybody feels whipsawed all over the place. So consistency, clarity of vision, pretty damn important.
Yeah. And there's things that you really need to be consistent on, and there's things where you can swerve a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. There's times where you got to exploit the thing, you got to stay consistent on. There's times where you got to be more exploratory.
Yeah.
And I think we're working on that framework right now.
Yeah.
And talking with our CMO, we're trying to figure out what's black and white, and then figure out that hierarchy and make sure that we're all aligned there.
Yep.
So that's something we're working on.
Yep.
And probably won't be sharing anytime soon, but in the future.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think figuring out. And I think it's really important at Stratum 5 for those individuals to figure out, right, those forever agreements, but also as it relates to the professional life, as it relates to the company, but also who they are inside, and being wise in that sense. Because if you're all over the place, it's that volatility is going to affect the consistency with which the thing that is in black and white, right? If you're consistent and the things are consistent, and though it's much easier to align those things.
Yeah.
And keep that holistic system consistent.
Yeah. Well, and it gets back to, if you're confident, right, and you really deeply believe in your vision and where you're going and your forever agreements and how you're going to get from here to there, it makes it easier to deal with. One of the other things I've been writing and thinking about recently is sort of we've talked about entropy within organizations, but there's also another couple of things within organizations, any complex adaptive system, which obviously a company is, which is anarchy and chaos, right? So anarchy is, okay, so we have these forever agreements, but you have leaders below you or individuals below you who are basically like, no, right? They're not bought into those agreements. They're not embracing those agreements. They're basically saying, yeah, I hear you, but, right? And so that's a part of that, creating a stratified systems theory is you're aligned all the way down, right? Everything you're doing is consistent. And because of that consistency and because of that alignment, when things get out of alignment, it's, just like with agreements, right? If agreements aren't being met, then it's pretty straightforward conversation. Was it you? Was it me? Or is there some other force that made it impossible for us to live up to the agreements? Obviously, if people below you are not living up to their agreements, then that's kind of anarchy, right? And then you have chaos, right? Which is a sister or brother of anarchy in a lot of regards, where it's not. Where chaos exists is where we haven't entered into a formal agreement that we should have.
Just the unknown.
Yeah. And it's I don't know always if it's the unknown or if it's
in that situation it is.
Yeah.
And they are similar, right? They're sisters in that sense.
Yeah. But sometimes we just haven't, we hadn't thought about this.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't necessary to think about it. Or we hadn't thought about it but we should have, right? But because something is obviously relatively material that we hadn't thought about or should have thought about, and now we have this noise, this friction, right? This chaos within the organization. The good news is if you do structure first, people second, your structure's strong, everybody understands who's responsible for what. When the chaos comes up, it's like, okay, it is what it is, right? I always say we're exactly where we're supposed to be, learning the lessons we're supposed to learn. Now let's just deal with it.
And ideally, you have a valve on the chaos, because chaos is an essential element, right? Because it's how you explore, it's how you learn,
yeah,
it's where you learn.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between having that valve, having that tap on chaos and having it, right? Because we think you should be succeeding 85, 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you really have to be 20% of the time in that chaos.
Yeah.
In order to learn and figure out what works, what doesn't work. And I think that when that becomes uncontrolled, right? Uncontrolled chaos, then that turns into anarchy.
Yeah.
And you see issues with that when people aren't in line with the forever agreements, right? So if you have way too many things that are out there and everyone's supposed to be on it, right, then there's less of an adherence or respect for the rules that are there.
Right.
Or rules isn't the right word, but
right.
It's like the
agreements.
Yeah, agreements. It's what's the saying of bad rules drive out respect for good rules.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have too many, or you have stuff that doesn't really make sense, isn't explicit, coherent, and resonant,
right,
then you start to just lose grip on everything. And there's a little, and that's a good thing, right? Because you're getting into tyranny a little bit there, and that's not good.
Right.
So it's a really delicate balance between those things. But once you do it right, ideally, what does it look like? And have it really distilled to what's super important.
Yeah.
That keeps it easy, and then that allows you to filter in the right amount of chaos for your organization, because it's going to vary from industry to industry, team to team. And
an idea that's related to chaos is stress, right? And I was at a Vistage talk earlier this week, and the speaker's topic was stress. And what was interesting is that I forget, I think it's like 80% of the people think stress is bad. And it's like, no, right? Actually, there's not enough stress is bad. Too much stress is bad, but there's actually an optimal level of stress. And, one of the concepts that's out there is called the Yerkes-Dodson framework. And it shows you sort of, more and more stress. And at some point, and then you have productivity, right? Not enough stress, and don't a lot of productivity because people are just bored, and then too much stress, and obviously everybody's overwhelmed. So just like there's a certain level of chaos within an organization, there's a certain level of stress. So there's a healthy level of chaos, right? It enables us to explore. It enables us to learn, right? And so if we think that no chaos should exist, then we've got this. I don't know if the right word is stultified, or right? It's just right. It's just
static. It's in that sense, it's decaying.
It's decay. Yeah, entropy. Right. Yeah. It's not growing. Right. So you want to. Like
it's also said. Right, and these are usually anti-fragile structures, and so when you do not stress there's so many tangents going here.
Yeah,
if you don't stress an anti-fragile structure, it's going to atrophy.
Yeah,
right. Like if you don't exercise, if you don't work out your muscles,
they're going to
atrophy.
Yeah, and it's the whole concept of flow as well, right? Which is like you want a nice level of challenge based upon your level of skills and experiences, right? And too much, you're going to freak out. Not enough, you're going to be bored, right? Too much, you're anxious, and so helping everyone in the company understand sort of the nature of adaptive, complex adaptive systems, the nature of growing systems, the fact that, stress is actually, there's good stress, right? There's bad stress. There's good chaos, there's bad chaos, right? And part of what I believe makes that not only understandable, but cool is when you help them understand that we're dealing with all this stuff because that place we want to be in 5 to 10 years, isn't that going to be awesome, right? And then we're going to be here in 3 years, we're going to be here in 2 years, we're going to be here in 1 year. You can see us actually making the progress there. And so it's like, hey, like we say, we're learning, we're supposed to be learning the lessons we're supposed to learn. So it's all good. Let's not freak out about it. Stuff happens, and it's just the nature of building and starting, building, running, and scaling a damn good company.
I think it's what we're talking about, the stress thing, and saying something more actionable about it. Mm-hmm. Right? There's as I would look at it, and I think what scientific way of thinking about it is hermetic stress versus chronic stress. Hermetic stress is dosing the right amount of toxicity or stressor or whatever,
right,
in order to induce an adaptive response, right? And you do that just little titrating things, right? You do it with everything from working out to, I think our studies, it's like if you drink half a cup of alcohol a week, that's technically good for you. Right. So that's not advising anybody to do that.
Brian Johnson, doesn't he have a little bit of wine every
morning? Bit.
Yeah.
And it's because you want to induce that stress response. And there's a lot of evidence that vegetables, a lot of the things in there, the real value there is hormesis. But then we get into chronic stress. That's where something stressful happens. It's overwhelming, and it just continues over and over.
Right. And because what's happening is it's constantly releasing cortisol, and cortisol is literally just sort of eating away at, part of your immune system, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's good in you need it, right? It's an essential thing. But, if you push it too far, and then you get like Cushing syndrome, we don't need to get into all that sort of stuff. But overabundance, it is bad, right? It's the same thing with the Yerkes-Dodson, right? Where you have that curve, and the hormesis curve would look more like, in terms of overall health, it's like it goes up and then it just goes right back down. It goes straight, right?
Yeah.
When you keep pushing it, it's really bad.
Yeah.
And then so the point there being, when you do have those stressors, right, you want to make sure that you are more or less in control of them.
Yeah.
But also that you're adapting them, you're adapting to them properly, and for the most part, especially in the business sense, that you're facing the things that you fear and are uncomfortable, you're facing those head on. Because when you do that, when you're taking on the challenges proactively, you're activating the part of your brain that is meant for growth and exploration.
Right.
But when you are reactive, right, that's a prey response, and then you freeze, and then that's bad.
And this is a system thing, not just like, this isn't responsibility. A great leader, in my opinion, helps everyone in the company understand that they're actually a part of all the feedback loops, right? Every one of them is a feedback loop, helping us understand what's working, what's not working. And that's why, I think culture is so bloody important. It's people are comfortable saying, hey, right, there's an issue here. And, this is what you think's happening, but this is not what's actually happening. And so we need to work on things, and we need to be able to talk about things. And, I like to say that, when you look at whether it's a company or society, right, you've got a leader, you've got a leadership council, you got culture, right? Culture should be strong so that there's a lot of feedback loops running all over the place. So you're hearing what's going on. And then the visionary that in this case, sort of that stage 5 leader has a strong point of view, but they've got to be really making sure that they're living up to all the things that they've all agreed to. And so the leadership council's there to make sure that the leader is not going off, and doing bad things or not listening. And so in some respects, you can say the leadership council or the C-suite or the senior leadership team, part of its job is to protect the entire company from the leader, because we're all less than perfect. And sometimes, when you're sitting at the top, you think, well, you're the smartest, most knowledgeable person there. But the reality is, everybody below you collectively is significantly smarter than you. You just have to have a strong point of view about where you want to take things. And hopefully you've done a decent job articulating that, as an example, in the Forever Agreements. So people are like, hey, this is not consistent with what we've all agreed to. And so there's feedback loops all over the place to help us, navigate the chaos and navigate the stress, address the entropy, and keep this thing sort of moving forward towards the longer term vision.
And I think that at the top of whatever system it is, company, state, doesn't really matter. There's a tyrannical element that's in the shadow of the thing. And right, if left to its own devices, it will usually deteriorate at its own accord. And so, right, what in really distilled fashion, what are the essential things that you need, right, that a leader needs to know to be comfortable, make sure that they are being properly guided and listening to those feedback loops across whether organization, team, system, whatever, to make sure that they are maintaining the right course and not becoming too mentally isolated and decaying?
Well, at the risk of stating the obvious, I believe great leaders surround themselves with people who are capable of, saying no, people who are capable of pointing out things that they don't know. There's a lot of people say, you hire people that are better than you. And I definitely, you definitely want to do that, across your C-suite. Every single one of them should be better. Greg's obviously a hell of a lot better at technology and product than I am, and Meg's amazing at people, and Chris is amazing at revenue, and now we got Sean, right, on the CMO side, and obviously Tim on the CFO side, and so all of them at what they do are better than I am. And what I want is, and we talk about it a lot, right, is they need to be able to push back at me, and they do. We have a lot of laughter about some of these moments where it's like, hey, dude, right? And it goes both ways, but you need to create that environment where, people are competent and confident and it goes all the way up and down in terms of, what your domain of expertise is. You're in a company where they're going to listen to you and they're going to respond. They may not always agree with you, but hopefully they'll explain why they don't. And then at least you have that insight as to why, something you think makes sense was not embraced. So the systems, that's what's a healthy system, right? It works all the way up and down.
I guess to bring it home.
Yeah.
Right. So we went a lot of different paths there.
Yeah.
Because I think stratified systems theory is a complex overall thing that is useful.
Yeah.
But isn't really the most viral kind of thing, right? So to make it right, if you were to try to pitch it in a way, in your own words, that would be most valuable for someone that needs to understand this or needs to know, right? Leaders in an organization.
Yeah.
How would you do that?
Number one, structure first, people second, right? So, if you don't do that, you end up with a structure that's not scalable, a structure that is going to break eventually because it's not built to help you go from day to day to week to month to month to, quarter to quarter to year to 5 years out to 10 years out. So to me, you get the forever agreements, and then on top of that, some of the other core agreements, like, where are we going to be in 10 years, right? Your compelling, audacious goals as an example. And now it's okay. So now how do we get from here to there? Well, let's focus on getting a structure that's not just about today, but because it takes time to hire and onboard people, you want to have a structure in place that makes sense 6 to 9 months from now, right? And then you want to be thinking about, okay, if we hit our numbers, this is how the structure is going to evolve. And is this structure going to continue to evolve and be consistent with this stratified systems theory, right? It really simplifies structure, and it really makes it simple for you to understand what each layer is. It helps you avoid having excess layers, because there's so much pressure within organizations for people to say, well, I want a promotion, even though it's like, and so you get all these intra layers, and all of a sudden now that's called middle management. And then of course, when things get tight, there's layoffs because these people are really genuinely in seats that don't fundamentally make sense. So to me, structure first, people second is like, if you want to become a damn good leader, you need to understand structure. You just need to understand structure. There's no better system for understanding structure that I've found than stratified systems theory, right? So, and it's not complicated. It really is not complicated. We've written a lot about it. There's a lot of good stuff written out there. Elliot's got a bunch of books that are out there. His are very thick. You don't need to go there. There's some good stuff.
We'll be putting out an article on it.
Huh?
We'll be putting out an article on this.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be out at the same time as this.
Yeah.
But eventually, we can link it in the description.
Yeah. But, all tools are equal. Some tools are more equal than others. I think that, I like to say it's not complicated. Yeah, it is hard, but it's not complicated. Getting structure right is not complicated. And so this is a core competency if you genuinely want to be a decent leader, and by that, not only just creating the company, but attracting and retaining people and making it clear as to how they can progress in their careers. It just makes it so much simpler. Less is more until it's not, right? So, for me, it's part of the 101 of learning how to become a great company builder, at least a damn good company builder, if not a great one.
Stratified Systems Theory.
Stratified Systems Theory.
Thank you.
You're welcome.